Hi everyone. Before we start, I'd like to wish all of you a very happy and prosperous Hindu New Year. Hi, my name is Vijay Iyengar, and I'm one of the co-chairs for OMAX. I want to begin by saying how heartening it is to see all of you here today. We as a board have put in 4 months of time and effort in cultivating and executing our vision for this inaugural event. And now that the day is finally here, it's a pleasure to share it with all of you. Now before we start, I have a few logistical things to go over. First, would everyone take a moment to please silence or turn off your cell phones? Second, we will be having our intermission after the first 3 speakers, and if you'd like to step out or use the restroom, we'd request that you do so then. If you absolutely need to step out between one of the speakers, please know that our ushers can only let you back in during one of the transition periods. Without further ado, I present OMAX Pittsburgh 2012. Thank you.
Hi there. You caught me at a great time. I'm just on the way to see a friend of mine. I swear I'm onto something. She'll know exactly what to say. Hold on. You'll need a backstory. First off, let me introduce myself. I'll do the perfect icebreaker. I'll do my name, major, year, and something interesting about me. Then you can do yours. I'm kidding, don't do yours. My name is Arjun Patel. I'm a senior chemical engineering major at Carnegie Mellon. Interesting fact? In my entire time at Carnegie Mellon, I've never attended a Purnell play. Stupid, I know. I'll get to it one of these days. I mean, it's just that time of year, you know? Carnival, spring break, it's all coming together. Anyways, the story. Rachel and I had just broke up. Rachel, right. Rachel's a senior psych major, you know. She's pretty great. We'd been dating for about 8 months, but in October we broke up. Well, she broke up with me. She said I didn't pay enough attention to her, whatever that means. Life was clear-cut for me. I had classes to attend, so I did. I had a job to get, so I got one, Bain & Company. I was doing well for myself, honestly. Rachel, though, didn't like the black and white. She lived life in the gray. So there I am, mid-October, sitting in my room, thinking about Rachel, obviously. I wanted to prove to her that I did care, that I did pay attention. She'd been working on her senior thesis, so I thought I'll look some stuff up on psychology and find something good to talk to her about. Start surfing the web. I come onto this website about positive psychology, something about how you should focus on how things go right rather than wrong. I see this video by this WashU professor, Tim Bono. He's talking about, here, watch for yourself.
My name is Tim Bono, and I am a psychologist. Now, when most people think about the field of psychology or what a psychologist does for a living, most people think of what I would consider to be the traditional view of psychology, that it's a field that focuses on providing interventions for people's problems like depression or schizophrenia or anxiety. And those, of course, are very important issues for a psychologist to think about. But in recent years, there has been a shift in the way that psychology has thought about itself as a field. And this shift, in many ways, is analogous to something that other fields and other professions have seen for themselves. For example, in medicine, 25 years ago, if you would have asked a doctor, what do I need to be healthy? Most physicians 25 years ago would have told you, if you're not sick and you don't have a disease, you're healthy. Ask a doctor that same question today, and she's likely to tell you, if you want to be healthy, you've got to have flexible joints, a good immune system, good aerobic capabilities, exercise on a regular basis. In other words, health is no longer considered simply the absence of disease, but it's something over and above that. Well, psychology has seen a similar shift for itself in recent years, and many psychologists have come to the conclusion that focusing on mental disorders remains a very important part of the work that we do and of what psychology is about. But we've decided that mental disorders is only one half of our task, because by focusing exclusively on the question of what's wrong with people and how do we fix it, we've been missing the question of what's right with people and how do we build on that. So over the last decade or so, we've begun to broaden our emphasis so that nowadays we are focusing not only on the negative, but also on the positive. Now, one of the most fundamental questions that people will ask of the field of positive psychology is, how can I be happier? What can I do to increase happiness in my own life? And these are fair questions. After all, we are told, even in the Declaration of Independence, that all of us have certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it's our right to pursue happiness. So how do we pursue it? Well, one of the ways that psychologists think about this question is to think first about our minds. And there's a psychologist named Tal Ben-Shahar who says, we can think about happiness first thinking about the state of our minds and thinking about our minds as if it's a container. So psychologists don't always make great artists, but this is a container. At all times, there's information going into this container, filling our minds. We meet new people, we learn things at school or in our jobs, we have different experiences with relationship partners. All of that is contributing to this information, filling this container, entering our minds. What positive psychology says is that our happiness does not depend as much on this, on the content of the information going into our minds, as much as it depends on this, on the frame of our minds as we ourselves are taking in that information. I'll give you an example. The research that I do in the psychology department at Washington University in St. Louis focuses on college student development. I take an interest in how students do as they're transitioning into university life. And it's very interesting for me to bring first-year students into my laboratory around the 5th or 6th week of the semester, right after the first general chemistry exam, which a lot of students take, because WashU is very similar to Carnegie Mellon in terms of the high-achieving, highly motivated students that it has as part of its student body. And for some of these students, they take their first Gen Chem exam and they get a C on it, and this might be the first C they've ever received in their entire lives. But what becomes interesting is how the students respond to this C. Because for some students, especially the pre-med students, they'll say, oh my gosh, I got a C on the first chemistry exam. This C means I'm not going to go to medical school based on this one exam performance. That's one way to interpret that grade. On the other hand, I have other students who come who get the exact same score on the exact same exam, and they say, well, this is disappointing, it's not the outcome I was expecting, but now I know what a college chemistry exam is like, and I know how to prepare differently to do better on the next exam. Now, in both cases that I just described to you, the information is exactly the same. Both students got exactly the same score on exactly the same exam, same course, same university. But it's a very different interpretation based on this, based on the mindset that they have as they're taking in that information. One of the mantras of positive psychology is that we can learn to fail or we will fail to learn. Learn to fail or fail to learn. Because failure, it turns out, is simply a part of the human experience. Everybody fails. Everybody tries things that we're not always successful at the first or second or third or 50th time that we try it. But failure, it turns out, is like a lot of other experiences in our lives. Failure is neither inherently positive nor is it negative, but the beliefs that we hold about it make it either positive or negative. And it doesn't always depend on this, on the external circumstances, as much as it depends on the mindset. In the example of the two students I provided you, again, both got the exact same score, both have the same objective reality of getting a C on that first exam when they thought they would do better. But for one student, it's a disaster. For the other student, it's an opportunity. And it depends on the mindset. So we know from a lot of research that mindset is powerful in affecting our overall happiness in our lives. It doesn't necessarily matter quite as much what our job is or how much money we make or other characteristics of our circumstances. Our mindset turns out to be often more important. Now, relevant to mindset is very simply the focus of our attention. Many people think that happiness is this mathematical formula where if the number of good things that happens in my life is larger than the number of bad things that happens, well then I've had a good day, then I'm happy. And if the reverse is true, then I'm unhappy. Well, what the research shows us is that it's not actually necessarily about the number of good things that happens or the number of bad things that happens. It turns out that what's actually more important is, of the stuff that happens, where do we focus our attention? This was demonstrated in a study from a couple of years ago in which a team of psychologists recruited a large sample of participants and asked each participant to keep a weekly journal. And at the end of each week, the participants were instructed to write down 5 events that had occurred over the preceding week. Now, some of these participants were instructed to write about 5 things that they were grateful for, 5 good things that had happened over the course of the preceding week. The other set of participants were instructed, write about 5 negative things, 5 bad things that have happened over the course of the last week. And then they followed up with these participants. And what they found is that the participants who had been writing about things that they were grateful for on a regular basis felt better about their lives as a whole. They were more optimistic about their futures. And they actually got sick less often. We're finding more and more evidence that there's a strong connection between the mind and the body, and that our psychological well-being necessarily has implications for our physical well-being as well. One of the things that we know is that happier people get sick less often. They also live longer. But one of the key strengths of this study is that the instructions were not, okay, you have for the participants over here, go and have more positive experiences. Go have more good things happen to you. Or you folks over here, go and have more negative experiences happen to you. Rather, the instructions were, at the end of the week, think back and focus your attention on the good things, or think back to focus your attention on the negative things. Because this is a relatively simple study. Any one of us could do this right now. We could easily think back to 5 good things that happened over the course of the last week, or 5 bad things that happened over the course of the last week. Because good and bad things are happening all the time. What this and other studies are showing us is that it's not about the number of good things or the number of bad things. What's more important is, of the things that happened, where do we choose to focus our attention? On the way home from school or from work, do we ruminate about that one negative experience that happened to us in the morning? Or instead, do we think about the more positive things that happen? Because that's what's going to be stronger in predicting our happiness. Where we're choosing to focus our attention, the events we replay in our minds, as opposed to how many positive or negative events there were. This is also relevant to things like the increasing rates of depression among college students lately, or the divorce rate, which continues to skyrocket. Now, these are very sensitive and complicated issues, and I don't mean to belittle them in any way, but what happens when things start to go wrong in our personal lives or in our relationships? There is this automatic tendency to start asking questions like, what's wrong? What's the problem? What needs to be fixed? Now, certainly when we find ourselves in those difficult situations, the important first step is to ask, well, what's the nature of the problem and how can we fix it? But what the research is showing us is that it is every bit as important also to maintain some emphasis on the good things, on the things that are still working, and to continue building those things up. Because if we are not actively and effortfully giving attention to the good things in our lives, we might have 100 good things about our lives, or 100 good things about our relationships. But if we only focus on the negative, those negative things are going to continue to spiral out of control. Now, when many people hear about positive psychology, or friends of mine ask me what positive psychology is about, and I talk to them about mindset and the focus of our attention and the importance of gratitude in their lives, a lot of people, especially my close friends, will say, well, that sounds fine, but come on, Tim, I know what would really make me happy, and that's if I had more money. Surely, if we had more money, we'd be happier, right? We could live a life of comfort and luxury. Well, a lot of people do believe that money buys happiness. So this is a question that psychology has taken an interest in, understanding whether it is possible to buy happiness. The problem is that it's a really expensive question to ask, because the only way to find empirical evidence in support of this would be to take a bunch of people from off the street, give each of them $1 million, and then track their happiness level over time. Again, a pretty expensive study to do. Most psychologists I know would not be able to fund that kind of research, although I see a few of you out there like, well, I'll participate if ever the funding comes through. We'll keep you in mind. But it turns out that we don't even need to do that study, because that study already happens every single day. It's called the state lottery, where essentially what I just described happens. Common, ordinary, everyday people purchase a lottery ticket and then suddenly, overnight, end up with a whole bunch of money that they didn't have before. Now, if money can buy happiness, then we should expect to observe a huge increase in the happiness levels of lottery winners. So there are some scientists who have done just that. They track the happiness levels over time of people after they win a bunch of money in the lottery. And there is a general pattern that has emerged when looking at the happiness levels of lottery winners, which I'll plot for you on this graph. So along the y-axis, I'll plot happiness levels. So higher value corresponds to an increase in happiness. You can see how sophisticated, at least psychologists, label our axes. And then down here, I'll plot time. So this is, at origin, the moment at which they purchase a lottery ticket, win tons of money, and the days and weeks and months that follow. Here's what happens on average to the happiness levels of lottery winners. What we find is that initially there is, in fact, a huge spike in the happiness levels of lottery winners. But within less than 1 year, happiness levels return to almost exactly the same point as where they were a year earlier. So within less than a year, happiness returns to almost the same point at where it was at baseline. Now, many people look at this and they say, well, wait a second, how can that be? These people still have tons of money out here a year later that they didn't have before. It's not the case that they're just blowing all their money and they have nothing left. They're still quite wealthy out here a year later. So why does the happiness level go back down? Well, one of the ways that psychologists conceptualize happiness is in terms of a particular formula. And this formula states that we can think about happiness as the quotient of what we have divided by what we want. So again, happiness is a formula. Happiness is the quotient of what we have as compared to what we want. One of the things that we have learned from this research is that, not surprisingly, as our money and our wealth increase, so too do our expectations about what we should have, that it doesn't take long for the denominator, what we want, to catch up. So that when we go back to this graph here, the thrill of winning the lottery wears off, because all of the glamour and the wealth that are associated with that win simply get absorbed into this new baseline, this new mindset that is associated with this higher set of expectations about how wonderful life should be. So the age-old question, can money buy happiness? Well, money can get us more stuff, which has the potential to increase happiness because it's increasing the numerator here. But it will only maintain an elevated level of happiness if and only if it is not simultaneously elevating our expectations about what we should have and what we want. And this is the part that the research says is easier said than done. Now, I want to be clear that there's nothing wrong with having lots of money or from being wealthy or having lots of material wealth at your disposal. What the research says, though, is that if our goal is to increase happiness, there are actually easier ways to do it, and importantly, ways that won't just give the temporary boost, but that will maintain a high level of happiness in the long run. And those go back to what I mentioned just a few minutes ago. It has to do with our mindset, the way that we interpret information, our willingness to give ourselves permission to be human and to learn from our mistakes to improve ourselves for the future, the ability to focus our attention on the negative, and the best way to do that, what the research says, one of the easiest yet most robust ways to increase happiness is through the regular practice of gratitude. Not doing it just once or twice, like if you wanted to lose weight, you don't run on a treadmill just one time, but if you do that multiple times a week over the course of weeks and months, then you'll see the results you're looking for at the physical level. At the psychological level, gratitude, again, has been shown to be one of the best ways to increase happiness, and the best thing about it, it doesn't cost you a dime. You don't have to change a single thing about the way that you live your life. It's simply a matter of every so often, every couple of days or once a week or so, just taking a few minutes and saying, what are the good things in my life? What are the blessings? And if we do those things, if we incorporate that positive mindset and focus our attention on good things and practice gratitude on a regular basis, then we are able to live according to the words sung by one of my very favorite songwriters, Bobby McFerrin, don't worry, be happy. Thank you very much.
I saw this video and it was great. It was just what I needed to talk to Rachel again. So I saw this video and the next day, texted Rachel to tell her about it. We started hanging out. Dr. Bono really helped put things in perspective for me. I had to choose my outlook, and when I reminded Rachel how great things were between us, not the misunderstandings or the arguments, we were able to work things out. I remember a week before Thanksgiving, we were watching How I Met Your Mother, the episode where Ted and Barney adopt kids as bros. You know what I'm talking about. One of those stupid internet ads comes on, and that feeling I had when we'd broken up, that sense of emptiness, almost like a loss of purpose, started nagging at me. It wasn't because Rachel and I were going through anything. In fact, things were great. But this feeling was there, and I didn't know how to escape it. I should be happy. I just got back together with my girlfriend. I have a great job with one of the top consulting firms in the world. This is what they tell you to do. My life, by every measure, should be happy. I did well in high school and came to Carnegie Mellon. I have a great family, friends, girlfriend, job. What else is left? But this feeling, this nagging feeling was still there. Now what? Right, the story. So I get back from Thanksgiving break, and I decide to get dinner with one of my friends, Mike. He was running a little bit late. He was meeting with his research professor, Dr. Chandan. So I decided to meet him in Doherty, and when I walk in, I catch the tail end of their conversation. But what I hear piques my interest, so at dinner, I ask Mike. Mike tells me that Hari's carefree, despite what's going on, always smiling. I ask Mike more and more and more about Hari. See, the thing is, when I walked into that conversation, it wasn't about engineering and public policy, it was about life. Finally, at the end of dinner, Mike just gives me Hari's email and says, do with it as you please. So now I had a choice. I could either seek Hari out, or I could let this nagging feeling persist, and for once, I chose the former. We decided to get coffee right before winter break. I didn't know what to expect or why I'd even contacted Hari, but this feeling was there, and anything to do that I could do to get rid of it, I would take. So I walk into the coffee house and, you know what? Hardy's a character. It's probably best if you meet him for yourself.
Today I'm asked to talk about happiness from the perspective of Hindu philosophy, or what it's commonly known as Vedanta. So I'll give a few points, I'll present a few points before you from the ancient Hindu literature called Upanishads. They are ancient only in terms of the date they were written, but their practice is as fresh now as it was then. Going by the tradition, let me start with the prayer. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutangamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. From untruth, lead me to truth. From darkness, lead me to light. And from death, lead me to immortality. We heard about Arjun's friend Mike. Unfortunately, I don't know who Mike is. So I'm afraid it's not the same Hari who is before you now. So the teaching of Hinduism has been summarized very succinctly by a modern Indian saint called Swami Vivekananda. It says, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest that divinity that's already within us. That is the whole of religion, that manifestation of divinity. Let's look at what is the nature of that divinity. According to Hindu scriptures, that divinity has threefold properties. The first is existence. It exists. It's infinite. It's eternal, it's beyond time. It has neither death nor birth, neither happiness nor misery. It's beyond everything. It exists. The second aspect of the nature of the divinity is, it is conscious. What is the point of existing when you are not conscious of it? So it is consciousness. Existence is called Sat in Sanskrit. Consciousness is called Chit. We are conscious of very few things. We are conscious of our body, not even the entire body. We are not conscious of our heartbeat unless we put our hand. But that divine being within us is conscious of everything, in and through everything. That's the second aspect, Sat Chit. The third aspect is what we are dealing today, is called Ananda or bliss. It's beyond misery, it's beyond happiness. It's infinite happiness, it's infinite bliss. Because if the being is infinity, then what is there to cause it some sorrow? There is no reason for sorrow, either within itself or outside itself. When we describe divinity, we use the pronoun it, because that divinity is beyond gender. It's neither he nor she. So that's the divinity, and that's our goal, to realize that infinite happiness. And where is it? It's within us. But in our current condition, we don't see that divinity, we don't perceive it, because we are unhappy sometimes. Why don't we see that if our real nature is that infinite happiness, why don't we see it? Because we are distracted all the time. We are too disturbed. We are too preoccupied with things that are not real. That is the teaching of Vedanta. There is a beautiful analogy of two birds in one of the Upanishads, and I will read that out to you now. Upon the same tree, there are two birds of beautiful plumage, most friendly to each other, one eating the fruits, the other sitting there calm and silent without eating. The one on the lower branch eating sweet and bitter fruits in turn and becoming happy and unhappy, but the other one on the top, calm and majestic. He eats neither sweet nor bitter fruits, cares neither for happiness nor misery, immersed in his own glory. This is the picture of the human soul. We are eating the sweet and bitter fruits of this life, pursuing gold, pursuing the senses, pursuing all sorts of vanities, and yet our thirst is seldom quenched. This is the world. Yet, in the life of everyone, there come golden moments. In the midst of the deepest sorrows, or even in the midst of the deepest joys, there come moments when a part of the cloud that hides the sunlight moves away, as it were, and we catch a glimpse, in spite of ourselves, of something beyond. Away, away, beyond the life of the senses, away, away, beyond its vanities, its joys, and its sorrows, away, away beyond nature, or beyond all our imaginations of happiness here. Away beyond all thirst for gold, or for fame, or for name, or for prosperity. We stop for a moment at this glimpse and see the other bird, calm and majestic, eating neither sweet nor bitter fruits, but immersed in his own glory, self-content and self-satisfied. The lower bird catches a glimpse, then again he forgets and goes on eating the sweet and bitter fruits of life. Perhaps after a time he catches another glimpse, and the lower bird goes nearer and nearer to the higher bird, as blows after blows are received. As he comes nearer, there is a transformation. The transformation is continuously going on. The nearer he comes, he finds himself melting away, as it were, until he has entirely disappeared. He did not really exist in that limited condition. It was but the reflection of the infinite other bird, who was there calm and majestic amidst the moving leaves. It was his glory that upper birds. He then became fearless, perfectly satisfied and calmly serene. That supreme state at another place is compared to the infinite ocean. There are rivers which are flowing continuously, emptying their waters into the ocean, yet the ocean is not disturbed. The ocean is calm and serene. That is our inner nature, and that is what we should aspire to attain. It's not something we can go to Giant Eagle and buy for $100. It's already within us. It's free of cost. We only have to remove the obstacle. We only have to remove the covering, the ignorance, and we will realize it. Let's talk about how to realize that. Professor Bono has explained that happiness is not an external thing, but it's related to mind. The Hindu scriptures also say the same thing. There are different layers for the human personality. One is the physical, that's the external world, and then there is the internal world. And beyond the internal world is the self, the Atman. So the external world carries stimulus to us, and our mind receives those stimuli, and it collects those impressions. And there is the intellect beyond the mind, which says, I like this impression or I don't like this impression. I like this object or I don't like this object. And beyond the intellect is the ego, or the I sense, I and mine, me and mine, that sense within us, which decides how to react to the stimulus. Our natural tendency is, if somebody kicks us, it registers in the mind, the intellect compares with the previous impressions and says, a kick has to be paid back with a kick. And the ego sometimes decides, okay, now let's kick that fellow. But what if the kick comes from your own baby? You will not kick the baby back. You will take the baby in your lap and say, oh, please kick more. I enjoy it. So that's the internal organ, that's the internal tool we have, which processes the external stimuli. And the whole path of yoga is not just the physical exercises. Yoga is the science of controlling the mind. The whole process of yoga teaches us how to control that internal process, how to react to external circumstances, That is yoga. There are so many stimuli coming into us continuously, but how do we react? Sometimes we get that quietness. Once in a while we get that quietness that we have been talking about. When do we get that quietness? There are two instances. One is when our desire has been satisfied. We become very quiet for the moment. My brother has a 4-month-old baby, and I observed him when he was a few days old. The only desire he had was for food. All the time very quiet, but the moment there is a little hunger in the stomach, the baby starts crying. And the mother listens to the baby, feeds him, and the baby is satisfied. I have never seen a purer expression of satisfaction in anything. The baby is serene. The desire has been satisfied. How long is the baby serene? Till the time for change of diapers comes. So that serenity we get, but it is temporary. We are all like babies. We are enjoying different things, different objects. But that enjoyment lasts only for a little while. At the physical level, it's called pleasure. At the mental or emotional level, it's called joy. And at the spiritual level, it is bliss. Pleasure is lower than joy. And joy is lower than bliss. That supreme bliss is infinitely greater than anything. And that is what we should aspire for. The little pleasures, the little joys are just particles of that bliss. And if we want to be happy forever, nobody wants to be happy just for a moment. We want to be happy forever. That's our right. We need to tap into that bliss. So Hinduism says there are 4 ways of going about that process. They are classified based on the inclination of whoever wants to practice it. If the person who wants to attain that is of a very rational mindset, very intellectual, the path is called Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, where you reason out, what is happiness? Who am I? Does this object bring me any happiness? We go on reasoning like that until we reach the final state. The second path is the path of devotion, devotion to a personal God. People who are emotional are prescribed this path. It's like a patient goes to a doctor and the doctor gives you a prescription. So that's the prescription for emotional personalities. The third is for very active people. You cannot sit without doing a work. The third is for that. That is called the path of Karma Yoga, with the path of action. By being detached from the fruits of the action, you can go to the final stage. The fourth is called Raja Yoga, or the science of meditation. All these paths have different teachings. There are so many teachings, they are so in-depth, we don't have time to go through that. So let's just concentrate on the science of meditation, the basic principles of the science of meditation. So we have seen that there is this treasure, but we are not able to see it because we are preoccupied with other things. In order to see it, our mind must become a little quiet. We need to practice the quietness of mind. Quietness is very important. For example, let us take the case of driving through Squirrel Hill Tunnel in the evenings at peak times. It takes approximately 10 minutes when the traffic is really at its peak to travel that 1 mile. Now imagine the condition of the driver. If the driver goes on making a fuss, oh my god, there's so much traffic and what can I do? Nobody listens to me, I have such a good plan for building this city anew, but nobody listens to me. We could have solved this problem, we can just go in 1 minute. But it's been happening for years and years, and the same reaction every day. Or there is the other driver who thinks, what can I do? This is the situation, I'll deal with it. And the other driver is calm. How much time did it take to cross the tunnel? Same 10 minutes for both the drivers. But what's the effect after coming out of the tunnel? One is so stressed, the other is calm. So we need to practice that quietness. How can we practice the quietness? It's by becoming a witness. Our mind has this ability to observe what it is doing. That's the greatness of human mind, that we can observe what we are doing. There's a simple experiment. When you wake up every day, just observe yourself. How do you get down from the bed? How do you go to the bathroom? How do you pick up the toothbrush? How do you put on the toothpaste? And so on. There is a pattern. You just observe the pattern. We all think if we are not conscious of doing, then we will not do it. But our body just goes along. Even if you are not conscious of it, even if you are observing it, the body goes along. What is it? It's a habit. We have become habituated to look at things in a certain way. We have become habituated to find happiness in certain things, find unhappiness in some other things. So if we observe what it is, we become quiet. The second is called vairagya, or detachment. Detach yourself from the situation. Just detach and see. It's like watching a wrestling match. Would you rather be the wrestler or in the audience? When you are the witness, you enjoy. So be detached. The third is called viveka, or analysis. Analyze the situation, what it is. What is it that is bringing me happiness? When I have that happiness inside, why am I dependent on something outside? That is called viveka. And there is practice. This is not an easy process. We must practice continuously, despite failures, despite little successes. We must keep practicing. The foremost and the most important thing is shraddha, or faith. Have faith. Faith in what? Faith in not somebody else. Have faith in yourself. You have built up this life yourself. Nobody did it for you. You have grown this body yourself. You have grown the intellect. You have grown this process of thinking yourself. So have faith in your own ability and achieve that happiness. There is a teaching by one of the modern women saints of India, Sri Sharada Devi. Very practical. She says, if you want to be happy, look not at the faults of others. That is the condition for happiness. Don't look at faults in others. Through this process of yoga, we become transformed. When we become transformed, we observe that we are more aware of things. Things which we are not aware now, we are more aware of things. We grow in efficiency, we work better, we love even more than we are loving now. So that is the process of yoga, that's the science of yoga, and Hindu scriptures say we must follow it. That's the most important thing. The others are secondary. Once you have this, the others are natural. They come to you naturally as a side effect. You don't have to aspire for lower things. Let me end with a saying by Swami Vivekananda. Teach yourselves, teach everyone his real nature. Call upon the sleeping soul and see how it awakes. Power will come, glory will come, goodness will come, purity will come, and everything that is excellent will come when this sleeping soul is roused to self-conscious activity. So let's go find that happiness, not somewhere else, but within us. Let me end with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayah, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May everyone be happy. May everyone be free of disease. May everyone see good things. May nobody be subject to unhappiness. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you.